Hello, Presbyterians. Welcome to another video SoMAcast. We've stepped into the big leagues, Corey. We're no longer just doing audio. We're doing video now too. Aren't we cool?
That's pretty impressive.
It is pretty impressive, right? Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the worship leader for OASIS 2013, the Reverend Corey Nelson. Hello, Corey. Thanks so much for taking some time to chat with me today.
Thanks, Landon. I'm looking forward to being with you guys in October.
Yeah, it's gonna be a great time. I've known Corey. Corey, we've known each other for what? Almost 10 years now. Is that right? We hung out in Louisville at Covenant Community Church.
Yeah, probably over 10 years.
Yeah, it was a good time. Corey is the one that taught me. I like to say, Corey, you are the one that taught me how to effectively lead worship when I was coming into worship leadership. I was still in that phase where I was still wondering what's the difference between leading worship, performing. You know, all those conversations were happening, and I really credit you with helping me think through some of that stuff. How did you come to your understanding of what it means to lead worship?
You know, I also learned from some great people, and just in part from a really wide variety of experiences. You may remember, Landon, that I grew up in a very different tradition from Presbyterian. My family's Pentecostal. And so I grew up in this kind of wild environment of what's often described as ecstatic worship.
Yeah.
And, you know, some people will know about that through, you know, seeing things on television or, you know, some of the kind of wilder ends of that. But for me, part of what that was that I've held on to as I've become Presbyterian over the years is that real sense of connecting heart and head, and that real sense of a much wider band on the emotional spectrum in worship than probably what we're used to in a lot of Presbyterian experiences. And so there was a time when I was worried about moving too far in the direction of emotionalism or sensationalism, almost to the point of manipulation in worship. Yeah. And so I've wrestled over the years with some of that in terms of how to find expressions of worship that are passionate and dynamic and engaging as I said, in a broader spectrum, but at the same time really connect to our Reformed understanding of faith and help speak the language that people want to speak in worship, and is not sort of forcing them into a place that's other than who they are. So that's not really a direct answer to your question, but I think part of my life experience has led me to have maybe a little different perspective on worship leadership than some of my colleagues.
Yeah. There is a whole host of us that don't like the label frozen chosen, because that's not how we experience being Presbyterian.
Right, exactly.
You are known to be the guy who bangs on the drum when you lead worship. You play a djembe. Where did you learn how to play the djembe?
There was a young woman who had grown up in a missionary family in Africa named Luda Welch, and the Welches actually are pretty well known in the denomination for not only serving in mission for many, many years, but then helping to lead some of our denomination's mission from the General Assembly offices in Louisville, working on the World Mission staff. Luda came back, having lived her whole life in Africa, and I had invited her coincidentally to share worship leadership with me at a conference years ago. Mm-hmm. And she was leading with this djembe drum. And I thought, wow, you know, that's really an effective way to kind of enliven, both literally and figuratively, a kind of rhythm in worship that really spoke, again, to some of that kind of passion and dynamism that I was looking for, but in a way that people could really embrace. And so she taught me how to play, and then I've since taken lessons and learned beyond that and experimented with different styles of how to use percussion and a wide variety of instruments in worship.
Yeah.
And
then that's part of the learning that I did under your leadership was a workshop that you're actually going to do at OASIS called Think Globally, worship locally.
Right.
That was really for me a really instructive time. What do you mean when you say think? Because you've had a lot of experience in mission. That's a passion for you. You were part of Tumamina. So doing this kind of worship is really defining of your style. What do you mean when you say think globally, worship locally?
So part of what I've realized over the years is that there are two distinct but intersecting issues for me in this regard. And one of them is that we want people who come to church, who are part of our community of faith, to be what I call globally conscious. Right. We want them to care about what's happening in the rest of the world and to pray for brothers and sisters in the rest of the world, and to the extent possible to be directly engaged in ministry and mission throughout the world. But oftentimes we don't provide sort of a way in for them to know and to care about people in places other than our own. And if people's primary experience of their spirituality is through coming to worship for an hour on Sunday, if they're not going to mission conferences, if they're not coming to adult forums on mission or other experiences, then if they're not getting some window into the wider church beyond our borders in worship, they're not going to get it at all.
Right.
And so for me, part of it is an opportunity to embrace elements of worship, whether it's music or liturgies or symbols or rituals that come from the global church, and to find ways to authentically integrate those into our experience of worship so that we are literally praying and singing with our brothers and sisters in Egypt or Cuba or Zambia or Thailand. And it's tricky, right? Because sometimes I've seen that happen in a way that really feels fake and kind of cut and pasted in. Right. It almost feels like a kind of ecumenical tourism happening in worship. And I learned some of that myself through participating in World Council of Churches events, where there was some really good leadership that was great at blending a variety of traditions in a way that still held together as meaningful worship, and wasn't distracting, but really was a part of worship. So part of it for me is providing that space for people to have a connection globally. But a second part of it that's as meaningful for me, or as important, is that I think that we need to be creating the church that we want to be and not simply reflecting the church that we are. Yeah. And in so many of our communities, we have this increasingly global village within miles of our doors rather than, thousands of miles. And it's always funny to me, the church that, for example, says, well, we don't need to do anything in Spanish because no one who speaks Spanish goes to our church. And I say, well, that's kind of like saying we don't need a wheelchair ramp because no one in a wheelchair comes to our church, right?
Right.
If you don't have the ramp, they're not going to come.
Right.
So you have to become the church that you want to be rather than reflect the church that you are. And so providing a little bit more of a multicultural, multinational context in worship can immediately set the stage of hospitality, so that when people come into the church from a variety of cultures, they recognize, oh, this is a place maybe that's not reflecting my specific culture on this specific day, but this is a place that cares about the world beyond itself, beyond its own homogenous community, in a way that clearly there's space here for me. There's a place at the table for me. And so some of that global some of those global worship elements can, I think, help to shape that.
Yeah. It's. I really enjoy and have enjoyed over the years, trying to live into some of the stuff that I felt like I was learning from you and from some others, because it offers a really good. I don't want to say counter, but counter to the fear that we have about things like contemporary worship.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Presbyterians who just don't like it, and that's fine. But this is a way of worshiping that really gets to some of that real heart enlivening passion that a lot of us are seeking in the life of our worship, and it's been really good. but it also is that, I like to think globally, worship locally. One of the things that you like to do, particularly when you lead worship at conferences, is, you've sent me and the other conference organizers a request. Hey, put out the word to musicians that are in your synod or even just in the Kansas City area. Have them come and play with me. So you're going to have a very local, indigenous flavor on some of these global tunes and these global songs.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that's important for me at an event like this is that it would be easy for me to kind of come in and do my road show and then leave. And for people to say, well, that was cool, but we could never do that at our church.
Yeah, wrong.
And that would be really unfortunate.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity to have people be a part of the ensemble of musicians, to sing, to play piano, to play guitar or bass or any number of instruments, string or wind, what have you, provides a way for people to kind of literally get this music under their fingers, or in their voice, so that people realize, oh yeah, this is stuff that we can do at our local church. And so when I come to the conference in October, I'll bring with me a whole stack of 3-ring binders full of all the sheet music for the music. And people are welcome to just sit in. And if they can sit in for all of it or part of it, that's fine. And we'll, carve out the time around the edges to rehearse, and we'll kind of figure out how to do that in a way that so that worship is led well. But we did that, for example, at the Next Church Conference in March in Charlotte, North Carolina. And to be honest, for me, it's a little bit frightening, because I show up having no idea, what's going to happen, and trusting the Holy Spirit that, people are going to show. And we had this quintet of musicians just arrive.
Amazing.
We had a piano player, a guitar player, a bass, a violin, and I think a flute or something. And it was just spectacular.
Oh, to hear those Ghanaian tunes specifically done by like this bluegrass quintet was amazing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was sort of like, Emmylou Harris does global worship or something. It was this really kind of wonderful hybrid of mountain music and the global church. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And to your point, I think this kind of worship, and it's not just global, but it also draws on some of the folk traditions of sacred music. Some of these, we might describe them as acoustic traditions. I think that does help provide a way out of the typical traditional versus contemporary worship wars. Right. To say, we can draw on some of the traditional hymn tunes, we can draw on some of the contemporary choruses, and we can draw from this breadth of music that maybe some people have not even been exposed to yet. Right. And we can integrate those into a real seamless flow in worship, so that we can do, kind of a modern or a more modern version of Come Thou Fount, right alongside a tune from Ghana, right alongside Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord, and have that really flow in worship in a way that doesn't feel like it's been pasted together by a committee, but actually feels like, a seamless expression of worship, hopefully.
Well, Corey, I'm really excited both to experience your worship leadership, to worship with you, and just to see you. So I'm excited for people to get to know you. Thanks for taking a little bit of time to chat with me today.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Looking forward to seeing you guys in October.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, bye.